Oxfam on our side. I think we're doing pretty well. And I did actually want to read you out, and I obviously got the time. But there's a letter by 225 Jewish survivors and descendants of survivors of Nazi genocide who condemn the massacre of Palestinians. Those are their words, massacre of Palestinians. I won't read it out because I don't have time, but they say at the end of that letter, we call for an immediate end to the siege against and blockade of Gaza. Never again must mean never again for anyone, not just Jewish people. Thank you.
Who's setting the... You want to speak on it, Councillor Swindles? Reserve your right. Okay. Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to focus on the first paragraph of the notice of motion, which states, concerned that the executive member made a grave error of judgment by deciding to publicly support one side of an emotive and difficult conflict by flying the national flag. It was the national flag of Palestine that flew over this building. The Palestinian Authority are not firing rockets into Israel. It's a terrorist group called Hamas that is firing rockets into Israel. And they have their own flag, the green flag, which some of you will have seen on the streets of Gaza. I've visited Israel and the West Bank on a couple of occasions. And I think what has happened to the Palestinians is truly horrendous. I'd like to see a two-state solution, but I'm very pessimistic about that. But I want to show my solidarity with the men, women and children of Palestine who are being killed and bombed in a way that is disproportionate. And to say that somehow or other we are taking sides by showing solidarity with the 500 children of Gaza who have been killed by bombs sent from Israel. People who can take that position misread it completely. I'm not going to say anything more than that, but I agree with the leader. There are times when we need to show compassion for the people and recognise the people who sometimes we would like to be friends with. I'd like Israel to continue to exist. But what is happening is wrong. What is happening with Hamas is wrong. But the people who are suffering overwhelmingly are men, women and children living in Gaza, Palestinians. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor John Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was on holiday, as some of you will know, during the time that this happened, so I wasn't able to be part of any of the discussions before the flag wasn't and then was flown. But I will say, without any doubt, that I'm completely in support of what happened in the flag of the flag. That goes to Councillor Boswell, Councillor Rankin and anybody else involved. At first I knew, in fact, that the Palestine flag might be flown over the town hall was when I read it in an email by a Palestinian organisation while I was in Sussex on holiday. I did attend a demonstration in Brighton during that time, a much smaller affair than I understand ours was. I can't be everywhere, but anyway, enough about that. It's going to be difficult to follow Peter and David, and that's good that I'm able to say that, because it shows how well and succinct we're being in the situation that we're dealing with. We're dealing with Palestine, and we're dealing with flying a flag for humanitarian reasons because of gross human rights abuses. And those gross human rights abuses haven't just occurred now. There's something that has been going on there through various offences for years. Now, I know we're all aware that there are people on both sides of the conflict who don't want peace, or peace that don't make any sense. Most people, in fact, in Palestine and most people in Israel do want peace, but there are people in the negotiations who don't want peace. And John Kerry, as some of you will know, went into negotiations, not just now, quite a time ago, and it wasn't that widely reported in the press, but he did say a few months ago that the reasons the talks failed were because of Israel. He said Israel had caused them to fail because Israel weren't prepared to start building their settlements. Now, this is the scenario you will have when you're in a position. Why should you stop building when you're being bolstered by American aid forevermore, and there seems to be no attempt by any American government to stop that? Then some of it is to do with the fact that there are people with power in America who would help to ruin a government if it were to pull that money. But it must be remembered that that is what's happening. And you hear Barack Obama talking as though it had nothing to do with him. When he is financing much of what's going on there, he's not taking the decision on the ground, but he's much of the financing of it. So how are we ever going to have a peaceful solution under those circumstances? People in this city, a lot of people from various persuasions, wanted to support the flag. And I've felt, throughout this business, since I've come back, it wasn't long afterwards that I came back, as I've perhaps said, and some of you will have read in the Evening Post, that there's been an element of racism in the complaints, Mr. Mayor, that have been made, because people saw that part of the congregation there, a goodly part of it was Muslim. I wasn't there. I know it wasn't all Muslim. I know very well it wouldn't have been. I wish I had been there to stand alongside the Muslims and others who were protesting at these abuses. I wasn't there, but I have little doubt from hearing the comments that have been made, to the point of drunken people, I believe some of them wandering into the town hall that Peter's just remarked, and passing abusive members of the comments of the contact centre, that has been behind some of what has happened. I think it's a sorry situation. I can't see how we can resolve it. We've done our little bit, and flying the flag when we did, I think was perfectly proper. The police had been heavy about whether we should fly tomatoes, I understand it, but there we are. The truth, that's the truth. That is the truth of it. And people have to take decisions, bearing in mind what might happen in law if they don't. And you've got to consider everybody's point of view when you think of it in those terms. And I just hope that this will soon pass. For us, it's no big thing. It's what matters in Palestine that is. And I can't see a scenario out of that as the political situation, particularly regarding what's happening with the US, stays as it is. I can't see a way out of that at all. People are critical of Hamas, and rightly so. But the Palestinian people did return Hamas as a government, and that you have to remember. And they did that not because they're particularly gone towards terrorism or Islam, but some of them were sick of the corruption of Fatah, and that came out during the discussions we had with them when we were out there. I'd been to Israel and to Palestine, and that was part of what came out in the discussions that happened at the time. I was one of the last group of people who met Yasser Arafat. He was a sorry and sick old man, the man we met. Far more interesting man was Mordecai Benunu, the man who blew the whistle on the Israeli bombs. We met him as well. One of us knew him. And the whole situation is a terrible one. And we've done our little bit, I think. Much, it seems, to the criticism of a lot of people. I would have thought they would have been there when they saw what had happened to the children, when they saw what had happened to other people. It astonishes me that there hasn't been more support. I'll leave it at that. And thank you all for listening.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very grateful. This is a particularly emotive issue, and I think that the way that it's been, this notice of motion has been brought forward has not done anything to resolve that emotion and the hard facts that we face in Palestine. If anything, it's only put oil on the flames. But just a few points. One of the things that members will probably find surprising is that the average age in the Gaza Strip is incredibly low. The average age is 17, which sounds phenomenally low, but there are lots and lots of young children there. I don't know whether any of the members in this chamber saw recently a photograph of a small child of 4 who dressed up, not as soldiers like we used to, dressed as a reporter, lost in detail. The reality is that we, and on this side, certainly will be willing to pin our colours to the mast in saying that the murder of innocent children and mothers and families is wrong, first and last and always. Mahatma Gandhi said that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth ends up with a toothless and blind world. But at least on this side of the house, we're not chinless, and in the way that the Conservatives are in bringing this nonsense of a motion that is highly political, and it is only there for no other reason than to put oil on the flames and to get another headline. And I'm very disappointed in the members on this side of the House, some of whom I have respect for. But it is a difficult problem, and we did what was right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I've decided to come in now and speak. This notice of motion, I hope that we were going to avoid the ins and outs of which side is right or which is wrong, and actually talk about the democratic process of actually flying a flag. That's what this is about. It's not, we can sit here, and we have done in the past, we had I think it was Michael Lavalette called a special meeting of the council, I believe, a few years ago to talk about Palestine and Israel. And I don't think we've come any further on that either. There are lots of things that we won't sort out, and I appreciate if you want to make some sort of statement about it, fine, but this town hall is here to make democratic decisions to support the people that are in this city. If you want to go out and join in other protests, fine, you can do that. There's lots of them going on. There's all sorts of different protests going on. I've been on a few protests myself to try and keep folks on to it. You won't be surprised about that, will you? So I think that's one of the beauties of this country, is that we can fall out politically, but when we get outside on the street, we're not actually going to kill each other. We are actually treat each other with respect. And that this decision to fly the flag was divisive. I know you have different opinions from me, but I believe it was divisive. The only other town hall that flew the Palestinian flag at the time was Tower Hamlets. And Tower Hamlets, where the mayor is on corruption charges, or it's already in the paper. No, Tower Hamlets. There was some later on. I agree, there was some later on, but at the time. The point of this is we have had fallouts about flags before. Many years ago, we had a request to fly the rainbow flag when Bill Tyson was chairman of the Civics Committee and Tom was deputy chairman. The decision to fly, the decision was not to fly the flag, and it was supported by a Labour member, I believe, in that committee. Whether that decision was right or wrong is actually irrelevant. The point is that actually it went through a democratic process. And here we've had a flag that is very divisive, as we've already seen, and it is shameful that people resort to tactics like throwing out racial slurs and all the rest of it. It may well be that there's been a lot of people killed in Palestine as well. In fact, I did witness on the television the picture of a young man in a green t-shirt who was walking around trying to contact his parents on a mobile phone, and within 2 minutes he'd been shot, and then they put 3 more rounds in him when he was lying on the floor. That was allegedly done by an Israeli sniper. I don't know, but it didn't look good at all. It looked terrible. And my heart went out to that young man who wasn't armed, he wasn't a soldier at all. It was interesting that Councillor Burrow brought up the Hamas have a green flag. The only other one that I knew that had a green flag was Saudi Arabia, which I've spent some time over there. And the fire stick now. Thank you, Councillor Rankin. But the point was that actually, and I do have, I think I've got a photograph of it somewhere, they did put that flag on with the Palestine flag on the Saturday, they put it up on the monument outside in the flag, the obelisk, and they pinned that up, and Councillor Davis asked the police if they would remove that flag, and they did under trespass law. So there is a link with Hamas and this particular thing, however distasteful it is. But we are here to try and go through a democratic process, and if we get it wrong, we get it wrong. And I'll be the first one to stand up and defend anybody as long as we're going through a democratic process. But in this case, it was a catastrophe. You can disagree with me, but it was a catastrophe. The leader said it was a wrong decision. It was made. It's reported. Let me correct that. It's reported in the paper to say it was a wrong decision.
Mr. Mayor,
can I finish, Mr. Mayor?
Point of information.
If you can finish.
I'll finish.
Councillor Thompson,
that's what you were reported saying, it was a compliment. That's, get me words straight. The point is that actually the Labour Party, from what I've heard, make a lot of decisions fairly democratically. Probably they vote on more things than we do on this side. Right? So why is it left to one man, Councillor Boswell, to make the decision to fly that flag? It was in fact it was a divisive decision. I have to ask, has Councillor Boswell got his finger on the pulse? Because the last council meeting, he stood up and actually berated Councillor Cartwright. Where's he got Councillor Cartwright? No, Terry, for suggesting that we should shoot vermin. 2 weeks later, I find out that they're shooting vermin on the flag market at 4 a.m. in the morning. Well, there you go. So, I really say, in view of that decision, that ranting that you went on about the last meeting, about not shooting, and then now you've made this mistake with the flag, in my view. It's a mistake in the view of many people.
Councillor Johnson, if you can just round up.
Yes, I'll round up now. Maybe you would like to consider your position on the cabinet. Thank you. But on that, I would like to recommend the notice of motion to you. Thank you very much for listening.
Mr. Mayor, on a point of clarification, there are 2 points of clarification. First of all, I appoint the cabinet, and Robert has my full confidence. And once again, what I said to the Evening Post, perhaps it wasn't well written, but what I said to the Evening Post was I made a mistake in letting the press release go out saying we were not flying the flag before we had finished our discussions.
Councillor Brugale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it brief with some quite accurate statements. First, I'd like to... Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it brief. Firstly, I would like to have my unequivocal support to Councillor Boswell. I think he made exactly the right decision to fly the flag. No questions asked. There was a little... No, please let me finish. There was a little bit of a kerfuffle after pressure was applied, but bottom line was that that decision carried on as it was originally made, and it was celebrated by hundreds of people in the street that day, and 1,000 people in the streets the day after. Ask him to consider his position. He should be commended by the whole council and patted on the back. Okay. I won't go into detail about the conflict and the history of it. We all know it, and we're not going to agree on it. But I would say I think it's an absolute travesty that we're stood here debating policy on flying a flag when children are being bombed. It's outrageous. I mean, 1 child per hour. I'm sat here looking at that clock. Since this meeting started, 2 children have been murdered. And we're talking about policy of a flying flag. Come on. I despair where our humanity has gone. Just going back to the notice of motion, it's a nothing notice of motion. It's trying to politicise this event, trying to point score. I'll put my hand on it just to get rid of it. Nothing's going to change. Robert will consult with the leader of the opposition and he will make his decision. And as for democracy, the people of Preston have elected a Labour council. Yeah, democracy is served because these Labour council have elected Robert to make that decision. That's how it happens in central government, local government. What is the issue here? If the people of Preston don't agree with our decision, they will vote for somebody else. And
despair at the Middle East conflict. I despair when Hamas come out and say they want to wipe Israel off the map. I despair when Israel responds aggressively and over the top. I despair that Hamas puts children next to their rocket sites to make sure they're killed if there is a response. I despair. It is true, I'm sorry, it is true, but just like my colleague Neil, and the issue here was that I care actually on both sides. It's that I'm neither Jewish, I'm not Muslim, I have no connection. I care about people dying. I care about war and its effects, and no war is ever won unless you win the peace. And you are not going to kill people into peace, and that's on both sides. And I would have flown the Palestinian flag, but I would have the Israeli flag right next to it. Because there are deaths on both sides, and you do not want to be belittling the deaths of the people on the Jewish settlements, whether you agree with the settlements or not. I think it was Mr. Hull said there, murder is murder, and it is. And there have been countless Jewish children, mothers, parents who have been killed, along with Palestinians, and none of it's good, and none of it will help bring towards peace. And I actually have a lot of time for Robert Boswell, sometimes as I go at me too much on the internet, but I actually have a lot of time for Julie as well. And I don't believe this was a way of stoking the fires of this debate. I don't believe she's that kind of person. You might want to say that for other means, but I don't believe she's that sort of person. And I don't believe Robert would go out there to deliberately, annoy Jewish people. I don't believe he's that sort of person. But I do believe the mistake was in putting the Palestinian flag without the Israeli one there. It should have been just the peace flag. And flags matter. Unfortunately, I look, Councillor Gale said, Councillor Rankins from Northern Ireland. Just ask him about the controversies when they took down the Union flag there last year, or was it the year before? Flags matter, they're a symbol for people. Whether you don't care about it isn't the point. It's what those people... But no, you said it totally about a flag. Flags really do matter. It's about their identity. History has shown us this. And actually, the policy's right, actually. I agree, because this is what we came up with a few years ago, when this was debated. This was exactly the way that if one person makes this decision, errors can occur, and that decision could be slanted. Because the Labour group is in a fairly strong power now, but at the time we argued, you guys aren't going to be in power forever. What if a different party came along and there was a white power symbol, flag on the outside? No, but the point is the precedent is there that if one person can do it, that person can put any flag. It could be an anti-gay flag, it could be a whatever flag they wanted to do.
But it's coalition.
What? Sorry,
it's coalition.
I'm saying I think the decision 2 years ago was wrong when it was put in the hands of one person. I'm glad that the amendment has actually said, you do want to come and speak to the parties, because I think it's important to stress test these things. There's something as important as this, and as influential to a lot of people as this, actually having a little bit of devil's advocacy against your opinions is a good thing. It's a good thing for democracy. So I'm glad it's in the amendment. I don't think there's anything too much wrong with Julie's original motion. I will support the original motion, and I hope we can move on. It doesn't happen again, because whatever you think, it isn't a divisive issue. It clearly is. The press have had a field day over it, whether it's through mismanagement of the media or whatever. The press have sold a great deal of papers and got a lot of publicity out of it. That's their job. Don't complain that the water's wet. They're doing their job. Okay, you've got to handle the press better. But all I hope is that we can all come together and say we don't want any more suffering to occur, and hopefully this flag incident won't happen again. Thank you.
Councillor Boswell.
Thank you. Naturally, I support the amendment, which I think we can dispose of the substantive amendments. I have always been willing to consult with people. I consult on road naming, I consult on highways issues, I consult with everybody in the council. I sent an email to Julie in error. I sent an email to Julie in error on Friday over a road issue. So I'm happy to consult. You only need to ask. I'm happy for you to listen to your views. I'm even happy to incorporate your views into the report when it's signed, so you've got your views on record. And I think that's as far as I'm prepared to go, because despite what Councillor Potter says, there is a series of delegations that Cabinet members have. It happened for 4 years when you propped up the Conservative group. They made delegated decisions. They have power residing in them. My colleagues have power. That is the way it works. And that's the Constitution. So I'm happy to support that part. I'm not happy to support the part about the condemnation, because I have to again repeat that this was a humanitarian decision. And if there's something that we all have in common, we're all human beings. And when we see suffering of the extent we saw in Palestine, we need to respond. We will be failing in our duties as human beings if we did not respond. If you say this has upset people of a Jewish faith, well, as far as I'm aware, not being Jewish, but the Jewish religion is a religion of love, it's a religion of compassion, it's a religion that uses its institution to promote peace and understanding around the world. I would have thought they would have supported us on this, because that is exactly what we are doing. And if they say they're upset, I blame political agitators, like we see on the Conservative bench. I blame professional political agitators who are placing interpretations on this, causing mischief out of this. They're the ones who are being divisive, not us. We are doing this in the name of humanity. They're the ones who are causing the problems, because it's not meant to be anyone's side. And we've had debates about the issue that who is right and who is wrong did not inform this decision. You talk about flying both flags. People came to me with evidence of a humanitarian disaster in Palestine. I see it on the media. I have to say, I do not see a humanitarian disaster in Israel. It would contradict the reason why we flew the Palestine flags. Someone said, why not fly the flag of peace? Well, it's Palestine people who are suffering. Not Irish people, not French people, Palestine people. That is why we picked the Palestine flag. And that is why there was an attempt to raise an issue. And also people said, as I said, we're insignificant, who's going to listen to us? Well, I can remember Bobby Kennedy saying that if you throw a pebble in a stream on your own, it has no effect. If enough people throw pebbles in the stream, you create a tidal wave and you can wash away evil. We're an ethical council, and I feel this decision reflected. It's not wrong, it reflects our moral obligation to a group of Preston people, to our Preston people, to bring attention to the suffering that's occurring in Gaza. I mean, when you stop being a councillor, you look back on your decisions, and I stopped being a councillor for 9 years, and you forget most of the decisions. But one decision I didn't forget, or one thing I was involved in, was in 1988 flying the ANC flag over. We got exactly the same response, though the Liberals did support it. We got exactly the same response. Terrorists, supporting a terrorist. We had a sadly now departed member of the Conservative group waving a little Union flag in the council chamber. Sadly departed, but exactly the same response. When Nelson Mandela, who we flew the flag over, died, the British Prime Minister attends his funeral, and we fly the flag on this town hall at half-mast, and nobody says a word. I think in the fullness of time, this will be seen that we have been right in this, and it was a humanitarian gesture, and it will be seen in the same light. Thank you.
Councillor Pauline Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's also words being bandied around like compassion and humanitarians, as if we on this side, or the Tories, don't believe in it. Well, I can assure you we do believe in it, but we also have compassion for other people who are suffering. And at the end of the day, in any war, and war stinks, I don't care what you say about any war that's gone on through the centuries or whatever, war stinks. Because it's the average person in the street who dies, it's the child who dies, it's the woman who dies, it's women who are being kidnapped around the world and sold into slavery. There are wars going on all over the world. We cannot be seen as a council as we're taking a stand for one particular war that is happening. We've got to be seen to be fair to everybody. Now, I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong. I'm not saying Israel is right or Palestine is right. At the end of the day, as a council, we should be being fair. And the one thing that really concerns me, and I totally agree with everything you're saying about humanitarianism, Robert, I really, really do, and the same with you, Peter. But we, as a council, cannot make that decision to side with one particular group. We can't do it. It's wrong to do that. And the thing that concerns me most in the amendment you've made,
we discussed it in the committee with Labour members present, Liberal Dem members present, and it was passed by the committee, not as John Brown would suggest that I did it. I didn't do it. I was the vice chairman. But the whole committee, in a democratic mode, voted not to fly that flag. And it came back to council. One or two members, John included, were up in arms about it. But it was done democratically, and people knew that it was the whole members of part of the whole of the council, from Labour, Lib Dems, and the Conservatives, voted together and said, no, we're not flying the flag. That went out the window. So when you talk about democracy, that's what democracy is. Not one person flying the flag and saying, we'll fly this flag. No, you're not going to fly that flag. Because that's when we get this nonsense today. And I say nonsense because we all know wars are terrible. But you're only putting into it what you want to put into it because you're the people out there that support the Labour group. You're bringing the politics into it, not this side. It's that side's bringing the politics. No, well, you can laugh as much as you want. You can laugh as much as you want, ladies and gentlemen, but you're bringing this political nonsense in because of if the member there wants to fly the flag because, you know, but nobody mentioned, I don't notice you didn't mention, when the Russians shot down a civilian plane, wait a minute, shot down a civilian plane and there was 200 people killed. Children as well. Not a peep after your side. That was a heinous offence. But no, you didn't bother about that. You're on about these kids. Now, I said, wait a minute, don't know.
What about non-white people? Put your name in your colours. You're talking about non-white.
Well, this is where democracy goes out the window because you're just a mouthing piece. I will tell him. Yeah, he'll sit there. You notice he just stood up before him. He was very quiet. He was very quiet, and we had to ask him to speak louder. And that was because you realise what you've said is a load of rubbish. Right? A load of rubbish. And just before I finish, you were on about Israel blockading Palestine.
I wasn't.
No. The members on that side, don't start getting silly about it. The Labour members. Now then, I've never heard anybody in this debate mention Egypt because Egypt is blockading the other side of Palestine. So why don't you mention it? Why didn't you bring Egypt into it instead of just going against Israel? And let me tell you, when you're in active service, and I don't think many of you have been, but when you're in active service and the shells are coming in, right, they're aiming for the Sanger or wherever. They're not aiming for children, but the Hamas are putting the children in a position of danger. But I want you to, I'm referring back to the Civics and Democratic Committee. Don't forget, it was a decision of us all, through that committee, that the flag was not flown. Now we don't have that democratic feeling because you yourself say which flag, and it bodes ill for people who want proper flags flown and not terrorist flags. And I'd like to propose that we have a name vote for the motion, notice of motions. Thank you.
Councillor Swindles.
I'd just like to correct Councillor Darby on what he said before about the notice of motion and the amendment. When I take a decision as a cabinet member of something that's delegated to me, no one in this chamber really feels that I take that decision on my own. I'll do exactly what I want. I consult with my colleagues, and in the end, my name will go on that decision. That will be taken by me. That's exactly what happened with Robert. Robert did not take that decision on his own. He consulted with his cabinet colleagues and the Labour members as well. We all had a chance to speak to him about it and what we thought. So Robert was actually taking that decision on behalf of us all. It wasn't purely Robert himself deciding, oh, I'll fly that flag today. I'm not bothered telling anybody else. I'm just going to fly that flag. He can't do that. he wouldn't last very long as a member here, because every decision we take is virtually done democratically. We select our leader, we select every member on every committee. None of us, technically Peter appoints the group, but he would not get elected as Labour leader if he didn't go through the election process, and every one of us has done the same. So Robert was the figurehead. It wasn't Robert that did that on his own. And neither the notice of motion or the amendment actually says that it won't be Robert that takes that decision next time. He will consult with, and they can agree to disagree, they can agree to agree. But if they agree to disagree, that decision will still be Robert's, and Robert will take that in consultation of whatever. And if the other leaders don't like it, and we don't agree with it, then that decision will probably still be taken. There will be consultation, and we hopefully will always agree, but there may be times that we don't. That's the way the cabinet system works at the moment. And Robert had the full backing of the Labour group when he took that decision, and that full backing has never wavered despite the hundreds of tweets and whatever. And I thought I knew how powerful Twitter was till I actually tweeted that it would fly over the flag. And I think I'm nearly up to 1,000 tweets and retweets now from people all over the world, from America, from Australia, even one from Joan Rivers at one time, and one from Joey Barton as well. And you think, where did all this come from? But that came from that decision. So it's dead easy to say that Robert took that decision on his own. He did in any circumstances. He was fully backed by all of us and still is today.
Councillor Neil Coyle.
Thank you, Mr. Well. I'll be quite brief. Flags are meant to send a message. Now, a couple of years ago when my wife was the mayor, Robert Boswell and the mayor erected the flag, Lancashire Cricket Club flag. That would send a message, congratulations to the cricket. Non-controversial, everybody was quite happy with that. But they are meant to send a message. And the difficulty, I think you should have thought about it, Robert, is that messages go to various people around the world. As we've heard from all the tweets, they've actually gone all around the world. But they actually mean different things to different people. I would imagine that in Palestine, the tweets that leaders had, they were delighted and grateful, quite rightly, to see this. I'd imagine Hamas may be thinking, wow, we've got a lot of support in England. And don't forget, Hamas actually rule Gaza with a rod of iron. They rule, not like Fatah in the West Bank. They rule with a rod of iron. So they will have a different message. The Israelis have a different message. The people of Preston will pick up different messages. It's the same flag, but different messages conveyed to various people. And I think, Robert, I've known you for a long time, and we've had a lot of amicable chats about all kinds of subjects, and we agree and disagree on many things, and your heart is in the right place almost all the time. But occasionally the judgment may be wrong. And I think in this case, you haven't looked into the full consequences of who reads the message that was sent out from this town hall and from Preston 2 or 3 weeks ago. And a lot of people will be rubbing their hands and not saying, good old Preston humanitarian, that is great, that is wonderful, we must go and send more money to Oxfam. But a lot will be saying, there's an element in Preston, or Preston supports Hamas. Now, I'm sure the last thing you want to do is support Hamas. David Burrow quite rightly described them as what they are. James is wrong, they do actually rule Gaza. They aren't just a party there. But a lot of people will be rubbing their hands and thinking, wow, that's grist to our mill, that's more funding for Hamas. And let's forget, the funding they get doesn't go on humanitarian within the Gaza, it goes on rockets and everything else. So the main thing is, in future, when a flag is being flown, think very carefully. Jamaican independence, straightforward. Indian independence, that's something in the past celebration. But there are certain issues where the message goes out is received by different people in different ways. And it's how those people interpret them. However well-meaning your motives, however well-intentioned, and knowing you, Robert, I am sure that we all share your compassion when we see these pictures. I've been to Bethlehem, and I think it's appalling that they live within a big Berlin-type wall. I want to change that. We all want to change that. We all want to see a two-state solution there. We all want to see peace descend. But
into ghettos and killed. They were being put in camps and gassed by the thousand, by the million. Some people knew about this and they didn't say anything. And the majority of people only found out after the war was over and camps were opened. They could see how terrible it had been. I think however symbolic flying the flag was, I do think sometimes, if that's all you can do, sometimes you just don't have the luxury of turning a blind eye. And we shouldn't just stick within tiny boundaries and feel that we are safe and it doesn't matter what's going on in the big wide world. I think we have a duty and a moral responsibility sometimes to stand up. However slight the thing we do and however much fuss it makes, I think we just have to do it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Buttle, would you like to use your right to reply?
I will, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Before we go to vote.
Mr. Mayor,
I'd like to start by reiterating what I actually started to say at the very beginning. What I started to say at the beginning was that sadly we live in a world where there is much suffering and conflict, and the causes, the effects, the rights and the wrongs will probably be debated for many, many years to come. It is not something that we are going to be able to sort out and resolve in this council chamber today. That was not the purpose of the notice of motion. As has already been stated on both sides of the chamber, the decision is subjective and there are views for and against. But the point is, and the point that I really, really want to emphasise, the point is that there were alternative options available, including flying the flag of peace, which would have shown our support for all people that are suffering in conflicts across the world. Retrospectively, it may have been the decision, but the initial decision that was made that we were not consulted on was not to do that. On this basis, I can't support the amendment. Sorry, I can't support the amendment because it isn't about whether it was the right or wrong decision. It's about the fact that an alternative decision could have been made. The notice of motion calls for those alternative views to be listened to. And as I said previously, I am pleased that the amendment does actually say that group leaders will be consulted in future. I actually have a lot of sympathy with Robert over this, but only in terms of the fact that usually he does consult. As he has mentioned, he consulted me about a road naming the other day. The bit that I find disappointing is that he has had the option to consult with every single member of the Labour Party to get your support on a decision that he never even asked us about. That is the purpose of the notice of motion. That is the point I am making, and I accept and applaud that the amendment final paragraph does now say that we will be consulted on future decisions. That's what I asked for, that's what I'm pleased that we have got, but I cannot accept the amendment because it draws us into the rights and wrongs of conflict. Thank you.
Okay. We now move to the vote. The request has come in for a recorded vote, so I'll hand over to Mrs Norris to explain the procedure to new members.
With a recorded vote, your name will be called out and you simply call back either for, against or abstain. So, Councillor Affrin. Oh, sorry.
We're now taking the vote on the amendment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr Mayor, I am considering withdrawing that amendment. If it's not being supported, there will be no consultation. I understand. Is that going to be the effect of our withdrawing the amendment?
The amendment?
The amendment supported, is it not?
Do you not want some substantial
Sorry, Mr Mayor. I've just been too clever by half. We better continue. I've just been...
Are you now saying we're carrying on, Councillor Rankin,
Yeah,
as we were?
I had a sudden thought that we could perhaps withdraw our amendment, which would mean we would also vote against the Conservatives' notice of motion, and they wouldn't get any consultation. But what the hell? Too clever by half.
So we'll now continue as we were, recorded vote for the amendment.
Councillor Affron. Councillor Atkins. Councillor Bax. Councillor Borrow. Councillor Boswell. Councillor Matthew Brown. Councillor Pauline Brown. Councillor John Brown. Councillor Buttle. Councillor Neil Cartwright. Councillor Mrs Roberta Cartwright. Councillor Collins. Councillor Corker. Councillor Coupland. Councillor Carl Crompton. Councillor Mrs Linda Crompton. Councillor Crowe. Councillor Darby. Councillor Davies.
Against.
Councillor Desai. Councillor Reeves. Councillor Faruqi. Councillor Fazakerley. Councillor Gale. Councillor Gardiner. Councillor Stuart Greenhalgh. Councillor Hart. Councillor Hammond. Councillor Hull. Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Leeming. Councillor McManus. Councillor Moore. Councillor Mullen. Councillor Iku Patel. Councillor Yakub Patel. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Potter. Councillor Pringle. Councillor Rankin. Councillor Rawlinson. Councillor Rollo. Councillor Routledge. Councillor Saxena. Councillor Seddon. Councillor Smith. Councillor Swindles. Councillor Thomas. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson Ortega. Councillor Walker. Councillor Yates. Apologies, Councillor Leeming, did I call your name? Sorry, Councillor Leach. Apologies. Are you for or against? Against. Apologies.
Mr Mayor, sorry, on a point of order, I know I'm being pedantic, but you didn't call Councillor Whittam, and I know she's not here, but...
Yeah. I didn't call any of the people that haven't been in the chamber at all this afternoon. The exception to that was Councillor, there was one councillor that I believe was here but wasn't actually. It's Councillor Thompson Ortega. Yeah.